Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm Natalie, and this is Scientology Life After a Cult. I want to thank the moderators today for being here and helping out. And thank you, everybody, for being here in the live chat. And shout out to the members as well. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we are going to be talking about Mike Rinder, who just passed away. We're going to go over some what I think are really cool remembrances that people are doing, and even a clip of a couple things from Mike Rinder himself. He passed away after a battle with cancer. And there is a link. In fact, Nancy, I should have grabbed it. Well, actually, it is in the description of this video. There's a link. One of the Mike Rinder's last words, one of his requests were in lieu of flowers. If you wanted to send flowers, if you could instead put that money towards his son's college education, that link is in the description of the video, and Nancy will share it at some point too as well. So welcome, everybody. It's a difficult topic. What I really want to do today is process it along with all of you. And many of you, some of you might not know who Mike Rinder was, or what his impact was on exposing Scientology, his history in the Sea organization, all of those things. And there's a couple key things that I want to look at today, things that you guys sent me too, that helps me kind of know where your head's at. Hello to everybody coming in the chat. Aloha to you. Thank you so much for always throwing those flowers and aloha in the chat, you guys. I appreciate it. The first thing that I want to do is I want to take a look at a video from Mark Bunker. And Mark Bunker has an interesting history with Scientology. His channel is Xenu TV. He still is considered an enemy of Scientology. But when Mike Rinder was running the Office of Special Affairs, and Mark Bunker was somebody that he had to deal with, of course, there was that, friction and going head to head. And later on, they became friends once Mike Rinder left Scientology. And this happened with John Sweeney as well. In fact, we have a statement from him that we're going to look at. And Mark Bunker has an amazing amount of footage and videos on his channel, a lot that were older, and I think he made them even 4K. And it's interesting to look back on those things and see how these relationships changed over the years. And in looking at this myself and reading these things myself, and reading these statements, especially with people who at one point had an adversarial role in a way with Mike Rinder, how that changed later on with them working in the media. I thought that was really interesting. So let's take a look at this video clip from Mark Bunker's channel, Xenu TV. If you guys have questions or comments as we go, can you please put comment or question in front of it? And I'll try and grab as many of those as we go along and towards the end as well, everybody. And I just ask that you use kindness today. This is about remembering a man that did make a huge impact when it comes to exposing Scientology. And he's a polarizing individual. People have very different feelings about him. And what I ask today is that we put those aside and remember that this is a man whose family is really grieving right now. Oh. Nancy said, "You got your Kleenex?" I'm like, I'm not going to cry. So just remember that. Remember his family. Think about his family and his friends today. So let's look at this video from Mark Bunker. This is a video that he just did himself. We're going to look at a clip and something else. Check this out.
A surprise for both of us when I contacted him and asked to do an interview. And we met at a restaurant in Dunedin. And it was a fun chat. One thing I remember asking him about, because of my incredible vanity, I said, "Okay, so what did Miscavige think of me, or what did Scientology think of me when you were in charge there?" Hoping, of course, that I would be this incredible threat, this monster of a combatant.
I love that Mark Bunker did ask him this question because, again, imagine you're he knew Mike Rinder when he was running the Office of Special Affairs, and Mark Bunker was doing his protesting and videoing. And to be able to ask that question later and sit down with that person and put those pieces together, I thought was really, really powerful. Listen to the answer he gets.
Who they could not vanquish. And Mike said, well, Mark, we never really thought of you much, but you were just the friendly guy with the camera who would wave and say hi to Mr. Miscavige. I went, okay, well, that's a little crushing, but I've decided, well, I better step up my actions here. So I am a little bit more of a threat, which is one of the reasons why I ran for office and won. And I think that woke them up.
And it sure did. It sure did. It was an interesting time when Mark Bunker was on the city council there in Clearwater. And again, I love that he was able to have that conversation. As a former Scientologist, not long after I left Scientology, I was able to meet up with quite a few former Sea Org members, Mike Rinder included. I met him for the first time, and other people who had left around that time. I left Scientology in 2010. In fact, I just celebrated January 1st was my 15 years being out of Scientology. And being able to have these conversations with people who might hold some of the missing pieces or to paint a bigger picture, I know I found that to be a valuable part of my healing. And I love that Mark Bunker was able to ask those questions and then go on later post Mike Rinder being out of Scientology and work together to expose Scientology in those ways there. And Mark Bunker has an interview that he did with Mike Rinder after he left Scientology years ago. And Mark Bunker has it back up on his channel, Xenu TV. I'm linking all of this down below after the video, but I wanted to take a look at it because he asked some really good questions. Let me pull that up. Let's go to that video there. And again, this is on Xenu TV, so you can read, or not read, but go listen to the complete interview.
I'd like to make that commitment to join the Sea Org.
So he was just asking him, like, what made you decide? What drove you to join the Sea organization after high school? Mike Rinder grew up in Australia, went to high school, and then joined the Sea organization. His parents were in Scientology.
I don't know. That's an interesting question, Mike. Nobody's ever asked me that question before, but I believed from a very young age that I was sort of destined to become a full-time Scientologist. And then when I found out about the Sea Org, that was just sort of what I was going to do. I never really considered that I was going to do anything else. And I wanted to go work directly with L. Ron Hubbard, where L. Ron Hubbard was.
This is interesting to hear too, because many of us who grew up in Scientology, even those of us who weren't raised in the Sea organization, I grew up in Scientology, but my mom, my parents, my grandpa, dad, they were all public Scientologists. You still grow up with this idea that this is the best possible thing that you could do with your life, is to serve and expand Scientology, to work with L. Ron Hubbard, to become a member of the Sea organization and be this dedicated individual to help expand Scientology. And for many of us, there really wasn't much of another option. It wasn't in my particular situation, where college was never even on the table. Finishing high school was not on the table. I had dropped out of high school after my second year to work for Scientology in Hawaii, where I grew up. And then I ended up joining the Sea organization. And it's interesting to hear him share this early part of his life that way. All right, let's keep watching.
I had a full scholarship to the University of South Australia. I was a very, very, I was in the top 5% of students in the state. And I was a very, I could have gone and done
he could have gone and done anything. I mean, to have a scholarship like that and then give it up to go work in the Sea organization with L. Ron Hubbard on the ship. so many people who grow up in Scientology that's your destiny. That's the thing that you're going to do. That's like the best way you could possibly spend your time. And many parents are proud when their kids join the Sea organization and end up, taking on that cause to clear the planet and help Scientology. And this is how so many people who start off really wanting to help, wanting to create change in the world, and that are Scientologists and that are told you can create a bigger impact by being in the Sea organization for a billion years. You can create a much bigger impact. And the goals of the Sea organization are so much more important than any goals that you could possibly have for yourself as an individual, that you're willing to push having a life, a real life, a life as most of us now know it, outside of the Sea organization, outside of Scientology, seems almost impossible. Now, I want to take a look too at an article that came out, and a bunch of you sent me this. And so there's so many. It speaks to the impact that Mike Rinder had when it came to exposing Scientology. Especially, I would say he's probably most known for Scientology and the Aftermath that he did with Leah Remni, and the podcast as well. He continued on with his own blog. There's a lot of content that is still up about that, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's take a look. Let's take a look at this article that also came out. Mike Rinder dies. Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath co-host, was 69. And there's a great picture. Mike Rinder, a former top-ranking Scientology executive turned whistleblower and co-host of A&E's Emmy-winning docuseries Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath, has died. He was 69. His wife, Christy King Colburn, posted the news on Instagram. While no cause of death was listed, Rinder was diagnosed with advanced esophageal cancer in June 2023. However, in October of that year, the producer said he was deemed cancer-free. Now, having been through a similar experience myself, as many of you know, in losing my partner, my Tony, last year, almost the same thing happened to him. No signs of cancer, and within months, he was gone. And I think it's been, that's an eye opener for me in the medical field of how much is really practice in ways. Medical practice is that can happen. And cancer is so complicated. And it is such a up and down and a roller coaster ride. And that happens. And I related to that because that's what happened with my Tony, except it was months later. But it sounds like he was in remission in October of 23. And again, it just goes to show there aren't ways, depending on the kind of cancer you have, that they can track it and know for sure what's happening inside your body. And that was the case with my Tony. When his cancer was growing again, it was unknown. And by the time it was known, it was completely out of control. So let's see. Rest in peace. So this is from his wife, what she wrote on Instagram. Rest in peace, my sweet, beautiful husband, wrote Colburn, who was also raised in the Church of Scientology and recruited alongside Rinder to be a part of the Sea organization, an elite group of members who enforce the institution. I speak for so many when I say the sadness and pain we feel mirror the depth of our unwavering love for you. Your courage, bravery, and integrity are unmatched and will forever inspire us. You've been the pillar of stability in our lives, filling our days with your strength, wisdom, love, laughter, and devotion. The world will remember you, my best friend, my hero, my love, Michael John Rinder. And that's from his wife. In the statement below, which you can see it on Instagram, Colburn shared Rinder's parting words, which included a dig at Scientologists' belief in immortality, as well as a list of regrets in not having achieved ending the abuses of Scientology, especially disconnection and seeing his son Jack into adulthood. Rinder was born in Australia in 1955 and grew up as a Scientologist from early childhood. In 2007, he made headlines with a high-profile defection from the organization, renouncing the church and becoming one of its most outspoken detractors. And I just want to say on that, for Scientologists who knew Mike Rinder, when Mike Rinder left Scientology and became public about it, That was a huge awakening for many. Like, wait a minute. The person who we knew as the spokesperson for Scientology, that up until a certain point when, till David Miscavige put all the senior executives in the hole at the international base, we would see Mike Rinder come out at these events and share news about Scientology. So many of us back in the day, that's how we knew Mike Rinder. I personally didn't know Mike Rinder in the Sea Organization on account of, I was Jill Nobody in the Sea Org. I worked in the Estates Organization and then for the Continental Liaison Office for a while, which is like Dunder Mifflin level kind of part of the Sea Org is how I always saw it. I did get to meet him after that, after we left Scientology. And that impact that it made, I can remember people in my family when they found out, it was impactful because that's one of the last people that you would have thought would have left Scientology. And I think it's worth making the point that anybody can leave Scientology. Because if people like Mike Rinder and others who turned whistleblower, who were in senior positions in Scientology, have left and been sharing what's really been going on in Scientology, then anybody can. I never would have thought on my best day in Scientology, if you would have told me Mike Rinder's leaving Scientology or would in the future, I'd have been like, no way. Absolutely not. So to see that happen for people like me, I left Scientology in 2010. The Tampa Bay articles came out in between 2010 and 2012. And it really helped a lot of people. It really shook them. That was super impactful to know that he left. And I just wanted to share that because I think it's something that many of you never in Scientology, but all in on ending this cult, might not necessarily know or remember from back then. And I wanted to share that perspective as someone who was in Scientology still left. And then I was working on helping other people, my own family mainly. But I spoke to other Scientologists, some who ended up leaving as well, and some who were more under the radar and they wanted to leave. They felt so much more certain in what they were witnessing in Scientology because Mike Rinder and others like him left and turned whistleblower. It was hugely impactful for a lot of people. Let's see. He was prominently featured in the 2015 HBO documentary Going Clear, Scientology in the Prison of Belief, along with Oscar-winning Crash director Paul Haggis. Prior to his departure, Rinder was the head of Scientology's Office of Special Affairs, as well as a member of its board of directors. The following year, Remini and Rinder teamed on Scientology and the Aftermath, which ran for 3 seasons from 2016 to 2019. Rinder was nominated for 2 Emmys for his work, winning 1. In 2020, Rinder and Remini continued their co-hosting partnership by launching the podcast Scientology Fair Game, which ran through 2022. And I believe that's still up. And if you haven't listened to the podcast, you should check it out. I really got a lot out of the podcast when I listened to it before. That year, Rinder also released the memoir, A Billion Years, My Escape from a Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology. He dedicated the book to his 2 grown children from his previous marriage. As he said, leaving the church cost him a connection with his ex-wife, Kathy, and the family. He's survived by Colburn and their 2 sons, Shane and Jack, as well as his older children, Taryn and Benjamin. And Taryn and Benjamin, as many of you know, are still in Scientology, are still in the Sea Organization as well, which is just, I don't know how else to describe it. It's such a bummer. It's like you never had or chose to take the opportunity. I mean, just that disconnection in Scientology is so damaging. And the way that Scientology manipulates its members and Sea Org members, Scientology Public and Scientology Sea Org members, into believing that this is the right thing to do is, in my opinion, one of the most damaging things in Scientology, because you're damaging families. You're damaging our families, our basic, that's our foundation. That's who, if you grew up with your family or your chosen family, that is your rock. And to lose that, I mean, some of you know what that's like. even if sometimes you have to make that choice because it's a toxic situation, but that's your choice. In Scientology, there is pressure. If you don't disconnect from this person who has left Scientology or has decided that they want to use their voice to share their story, you will become excommunicated. You will become declared a suppressive person. There's no room for that. There's also no room in Scientology for forgiveness. That is not a word that I didn't even realize wasn't really part of any type of Scientology teaching that I could remember or recall. And for me, I never even really understood, I think, what forgiveness was because it was so not a part of my upbringing or who I even considered. Like, I just didn't think a lot about it. I thought in a very Scientology way. And I've shared this with you guys before. I read a book called The Shack. I think a lot of you read that book. It became a movie. And the book talks about, there's a line in the book where someone says, forgiveness is just taking your hand off the neck of that person. Doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't mean everything is just perfect. You are just removing your hand from their neck. It just can be that simple. Do we need to keep trying to punish someone? Do we need to, I'm going to, like that metaphor of just like, having your hand on your neck. Like, is that it? It doesn't help the individual either. It's funny because it was like it was a nonfiction book, but still I got so much out of that. And over the years and looking at so much, my healing from Scientology after 35 years in this cult and leaving with 3 generations of my family, the biggest part of that was making the decision that I was going to take my hand off the neck of anybody that I felt I had it there. Because you cannot have, in my opinion, healing and help anybody when we're doing that. But at the same time, that's an individual decision, right? For us as individuals. That impacted me so much after I left Scientology. I actually read the book, I think, when I was still in Scientology, but it stayed with me and it's kind of been a guidepost to me for a degree, because even though I might have my disagreements with someone, because in Scientology, it's very black and white. It's very us against them. It's very, if you're not with us, you're against us. If you're not behaving in a way that is exactly as we approve, you're a suppressive person. You're bad. You're evil. People have their own individual struggles on what they're going through. And in leaving Scientology and moving away from that mindset, I wanted to open myself up to the idea of forgiveness and doing that, because with so much that happens when you grow up in an organization, in a cult like Scientology, and I think many of you can relate who've never been in Scientology but are all in on ending this cult, if you've had your own difficult relationships or trauma, when we sit in it and it's just a constant replay in our heads, it doesn't help us as individuals. That's where I think therapy really comes in handy, because that is a safe place to process. And I'm kind of going off tangent here, but when I see these videos and these clips of, like, with Mark Bunker and John Sweeney, and hear what other people in the media who once went head to head with Mike Rinder, how they got beyond that and worked together after that, I think is a beautiful message and an example of how that can happen. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect, but you can still, you can still do that. There's an article that Yashir Ali put out, a blog post. It's probably more than an article. And I thought, and many of you thought, because I had a lot of emails about this one that they sent in, was so powerful as well. And I want to take a look at that. And thank you guys for putting your kind thoughts in the chat for his family and for his friends, and for remembering how difficult this is for all of them. It's a lot for many to process. I appreciate that. Thank you for keeping it aloha. That is what I'm talking about today. And thank you guys for doing that. All right, so let's take a look at this. A bunch of you must have read this already, because I got a lot of emails about it. And again, this is from Yashir Ali. I'm heartbroken to share the news that my friend Mike Rinder has passed away after a nearly 2-year battle with cancer. Mike was not only my friend, he was one of my heroes, and I will always be grateful to my dear friend Leah Remni for introducing me to Mike 8 years ago. For those of you who have never watched Leah's series on A&E, Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath, or seen Mike in other documentaries, Mike was a top official in Scientology for decades before escaping in 2007. Mike was brought into Scientology by his parents when he was a child, and later on, he lived and worked on Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard's ship. Mike was one of the few people still alive in this century who spent a lot of time with Hubbard and had direct experience serving him. For a vast majority of his life, Mike was a Sea Org member. The Sea Org is Scientology's workforce. Members of the Sea Org are essentially enslaved. They are held against their will. They are made to work 18 to 19 hours a day, 7 days a week. Escaping is virtually the only option for them. One thing I want to say about that is, for many, hold on, I can't decide what I'm doing here with my screen. For many, that is true. But I also want to stress the mental trap. In Scientology, it's not always about being held against your will. Not everybody there is being held against their will. The mind control makes you think that you're doing it because of the pressure of what happens if you leave, if you think outside the box, if you take off the blinders, if you look that way, if you ask questions. Scientology is so much about keeping yourself in that trap because of the mind control and the conditioning that will happen and the reprogramming that will occur if you don't fall in line. And so, which, little thing, I just felt like I wanted to make that differentiation there about it. Okay, so for many years, Mike was in charge of the Office of Special Affairs, Scientology's global intelligence agency, which, right, all churches need that, tasked with the surveillance and silencing of anyone that Scientology deemed an enemy. Mike oversaw the hiring of hundreds of attorneys, private investigators, and other operatives who were tasked with destroying the lives of anyone or any organization that got in Scientology's way. They do it, this we know. The definition of enemy in Scientology is very broad and almost always includes anyone who is trying to get the abuses of Scientology to end, and for people like Scientology's criminal leader, David Miscavige, to be held accountable. Enemies include former Scientologists, activists, survivors of SA, survivors of Scientology, David Miscavige's own family members, reporters, and of course, yours truly. Eventually, the very agency that Mike helped build was turned against him after he escaped. When he was in Scientology, no one received more abuse at the hands of David Miscavige than Mike. He endured dozens of beatings by Miscavige himself. For years, he was kept in the Hole, a prison that David Miscavige set up on a Scientology base where he held Scientology officials he wanted to torture. Mike lived in the Hole for years, where he endured harsh interrogations and ate slop, literally from a bucket. After enduring dozens of beatings, being held prisoner, and undergoing psychologically devastating interrogations and threats, Mike fled Scientology with nothing but his passport and a briefcase. Escaping Scientology is considered a high crime, and as a result of leaving without authorization, Mike was not only declared a suppressive person, the highest form of enemy in Scientology. Scientologists are required to do everything they can to destroy SPs. But his wife was forced to divorce him, and their 2 children, Taryn and Benjamin, were forced to disconnect from him. It wasn't just his children and ex-wife. Mike's entire family, including his mom and brother, were forced to disconnect from him. He found out his mom had died from someone who felt bad that he had been banned from seeing her. Most of his family filmed mean-spirited videos, all under the command of David Miscavige, using tax-exempt funds that were filled with horrific lies about him. These videos were published on the website Scientology set up to attack Mike. For years since he escaped, he had to endure seeing his children and brother attack him with lies whenever he logged on to the internet. The videos were everywhere. The videos are still up and will, per Scientology policy, remain up as long as Scientology exists as an organization. Death offers no reprieve from Scientology attacks. That is very true. That's so true. Instead, Mike could have negotiated a multi-million-dollar settlement for himself from Scientology, agreed to stay silent, and enjoyed a nice, quiet life. He wouldn't have been the first former official to do this. There's a long history of cowardly former Scientology officials agreeing to remain silent in exchange for a big check. Instead, Mike spent the past 17 years doing everything he could to fight Scientology and David Miscavige. After 2010, he accepted nearly every interview opportunity, no matter how small the outlet. He helped many former Scientologists leave and find safety. He wrote an amazing book. He gave law enforcement agencies like the FBI many, many hours of his time to try to convince them that Scientology and David Miscavige needed to be investigated. He co-hosted and co-produced the Aftermath series with Leah, and they also co-hosted a podcast with nearly 100 episodes revealing Scientology abuses. Mike was constantly followed and harassed by Scientology private investigators. Mike was the first to admit that he was involved in some terrible things as a Scientology official, and he spent nearly 2 decades making up for it. I can attest too, like I remember when Mike and Christy came to town, we had a whole reunion get together of former Sea Org members and some former Scientologists here in Minnesota. And we were able to hang out, and anytime I was ever with him, there were private investigators following nearby. Because of what Mike endured, it was always difficult to imagine him dying. He put up with so much in Scientology, and after he left, that cancer almost seemed like a bump in the road rather than what would take him from us. As many of you know, exposing the abuses of Scientology has been a 2-decade-long obsession of mine, and one for which I have sacrificed a great deal. Scientology is an incredibly complex subject. There are thousands of policies which govern Scientology and Scientologists, and there are many nuanced and contradictory beliefs. So receiving praise from Mike on my Scientology reporting meant the world. Frankly, I longed for his approval. Whenever he told me that I got something right or understood a complex Scientology issue, it would make my week. Mike was quintessentially Australian in that he was never over the top in his emotions. And if he offered praise, it was just a quick text. That didn't bother me. It's who he was. But in June of last year, after I published a long investigation into Shelley Miscavige and the LAPD, he called me and told me how proud he was of me, something he had never expressed before, and said, "You got everything right. If I didn't know better, I would have thought you were a Scientologist." He then shared my piece on his blog and wrote, "I'm posting this to help get the widest possible distribution of this very important piece by my friend Yashir Ali. He has done an astonishing job of telling the story of Shelley Miscavige, especially the cover-up by Scientology, assisted by the LAPD. He has uncovered new and shocking information about the circumstances of how the LAPD verified Shelley was okay, and a tragic photo of Shelley taken from her last issued driver's license that tells so much. It is a masterpiece of giving the big picture while including and explaining details of the Scientology world that make the big picture understandable. And he has some new reporting that will have both the LAPD and Scientology spinning. I'm sharing this because I never got to properly thank Mike for it. Mike, when we got off the phone that day, I cried because what you said meant so much to me. Thank you for your friendship, for teaching me as much as you did, for always believing in me, and for forgiving me when you did." Something that former Scientologists have in common is that once they leave Scientology, they want you to understandably get as far away from it as possible. So after Mike fled Scientology and got remarried, where did he end up living? In the Clearwater, Florida area. Clearwater is where the headquarters of Scientology is. It would be like someone escaping North Korea, then choosing to live near the border or South Korea, but still in North Korea territory. But he did it for one simple, heartbreaking reason. He knew that if anyone was likely to leave Scientology, it was his son, Benjamin. Benjamin lived in Clearwater. He thought that if Benjamin was going to escape Scientology, he wanted him to be able to find refuge nearby. Benjamin and Taryn, if for some reason you're reading this now, It means you have some doubt about Scientology. Your dad was the first to admit that, like every Scientologist, and especially every Sea Org member, he was not a good father. But he did everything he could to help you once he left. He even wrote his book for you. I've included the letter he wrote to you in this book below. There's an incredible world waiting for you, Taryn and Benjamin. One where you aren't forced to endure abuse or be told what to say, think, and do 24/7. I know you've been told that in the nasty word we don't say anymore, that word, that term Scientologists use for non-Scientologists is some evil, horrible place where everyone suffers. But that is a lie. You have a brother, a stepbrother, and an incredible stepmom who have never had the pleasure of meeting you, and I know they would love to. Reach out to the Aftermath Foundation and they'll help you leave. I promise you won't regret it. In his final letter, Mike said that his only real regret was that he didn't get to achieve two things: the end of Scientology and seeing his son Jack into adulthood. I'm more dedicated now than ever to continuing the important work that Mike did. And in the coming days, I will share how you can help his son Jack. Mike was lucky to have found his wife, Christy, who was also a former Scientologist and who spent years speaking out against the abuses. Christy is one hell of a woman. And while I normally hate the word partner to describe someone's spouse, Christy was a partner in every sense of the word to Mike. I'm thinking of her, their son Jack, and Mike's stepson, Christy's son Shane. If Mike and his work meant something to you, I hope you'll leave a comment below and I'll share your comments with Christy and her boys in the future. I will love you forever, Mike. We'll keep things going over here in your name. I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I really did. That those relationships that were turned around, especially being able to go back with people in the media like Mark Bunker and John Sweeney, which we're going to look at something from John Sweeney. And I think that's something that is really worth mentioning and acknowledging. Like, I think that took a lot too. I try to put myself in that situation. There's been people that I've talked to since I left Scientology, other former members who left, and we're able to put together a lot of pieces of things that I wonder about at the time. And the number of blog articles and the content and the show Scientology Aftermath and the podcast that exists and will stay up there will continue to help a lot of people. A lot of people who either want to leave Scientology, are trying to leave Scientology, or left Scientology and are having doubts about having left. Because that might surprise you. Maybe it doesn't, but that happens, especially when you've been indoctrinated to believe that Scientology is the only help that mankind has, that your future on the planet as a spiritual being, the future of your children and anybody you love depends on what you do in Scientology now and today. That is a big thing to let go of and to move beyond that. And to know that what you're doing is the right thing. When I left Scientology, even though I was very certain that it was the right thing, for a little while, there was a part of me that wondered, was I going to be struck down by lightning? I don't know. We grew up being told you can never say anything against L. Ron Hubbard or Scientology or the Sea Org or Scientology management. And then not long after I leave Scientology, here's somebody like Mike Rinder and other people as well, who were senior executives who came forward and were saying, yeah, we left. We saw what you saw. In fact, we saw a lot more. We saw a lot more, and they shared what they knew. And that helped me be more certain that I was doing the right thing, because I left with 3 generations of my family. Again, even though I felt confident I was doing the right thing, there was part of me that, what if I wasn't? And yeah, I'm sorry. That just really, I haven't thought about that in a long time. But because other people shared their stories, Mike Rinder was among one of them. There were so many, and there continues to be so many. I stayed strong in my confidence that I was doing the right thing and getting my family out of Scientology. And I wonder sometimes, would I have been able to do that if these other people who came before me didn't do what they did and share their stories and blow the whistle and put themselves on the line, put themselves in the crosshairs of Scientology. And one of the reasons I'm here on YouTube today is because I have an opportunity to pay that forward. Other people did it for me, for my family, for friends who left Scientology. And I want to be able to do that now today. And it's one of the reasons I like sharing survivor stories as well, because they make a difference. Cult experts that I've interviewed have said the biggest impact we can make in getting people to not join cult is to share the survivor stories of people who survived it. And not just for the people who are in there or who might want to leave or who left or who feel alone. Kelly Copter, I love you. Thank you. Now you're making me cry just because you're being so kind. Thank you for being here. Without that, how different might it be for many of us who left at that time or today? And it's a lot of people, you guys. There are people in our community who've been speaking out against Scientology way before I got here. Like I said, I left 15 years ago. I spoke out some then, here and there over the years, but have only been back really focused on it for the last year. People like even, Jenna Miscavige. Jenna wrote an amazing book. She's been speaking out against Scientology and raising awareness long before there was a group of people to stand by her. So many people came before me and did this. And my hope with my channel is to continue to do the same and elevate the voices of survivors of this cult and others, and find ways that we can heal together and educate. And maybe through the education about Scientology and what makes it such a human trafficking cult and why it's so insidious, that maybe you won't walk into a cult. Maybe you'll recognize if there's a high control group and someone's trying to tell you what to think, what to do, what to believe, what you should do. I mean, let's be honest. That behavior is not limited to cults. Many people seem to think they can just, and you can. Everybody gets an opinion, but that you can tell people what to do, what to think, how to behave. It's human nature. But Scientology takes it next level with their disconnection policy. Now, I want to show you something from John Sweeney. And John Sweeney, well, he tells the story, so I will just let him kind of share the story about him and Mike Rinder.
My great friend, my great former enemy in the Church of Scientology, Mike Rinder, has passed away. Forgive me, I've been to a friend's wedding, so I'm a bit squiffy, but I want to say the following. Mike Rinder was a hero of our time. And if we're worried about North Korea, about Islamic State, then understanding crazy cults like the Church of Scientology is a wonderful thing. By the way, the Church of Scientology said that I'm a bigot, drunk, and a psycho. I say that they're a space alien cult. 2007, we made this great film called Scientology and Me.
And I don't know if you did not see this film that John Sweeney did, Scientology and Me, search it up and check it out. There have been clips of that and the interactions that occurred between John Sweeney and Mike Rinder and others that were just epic. I mean, if you have not seen it, I almost wish I had it pulled up, but you definitely you're going to want to check that out.
In which I lose my temper with the Church of Scientology. Look it up. One of the two people who are looking at me, who are organizing this, is Mike Rinder. And what happens is, while working with us, while dealing with us, he understands something. So there's a moment when I say, why can't I interview David Miscavige, the leader of the Church of Scientology? They say it's a good thing. I say it's a cult, a space alien cult. Anyway, why can't we interview him? Why can't I interview him? And Mike says, you can't interview him, John, because you're an asshole. At which point, Sarah Mole, great producer, Bill Brown, great cameraman, start giggling. And here's the difference. My gang are allowed to laugh and take the piss out of me.
That I thought was such a powerful statement too, because we've talked about that a lot on my channel, and I joke about, how I'm just the biggest joker and degrader, because that's what we were called in Scientology, if you dared to laugh. And that is so true. And in hearing that him being called an a-hole, John Sweeney's people laughed at it and they got to laugh about it, but that would never happen on the other end. Everything is just so serious. You're not just a simple thing like being allowed to laugh, even if it's inappropriate. I am the queen at laughing inappropriately. I don't know what my problem is, but you should still have the freedom to do that. You know what I'm saying? And I can remember multiple times in Scientology and the Sea organization and out of like really having to control that and not do that. And it's just, that's one of my favorite things about being on YouTube now, is being able to talk about it. And the stuff that's so ridiculous, I can laugh at it. I can joke about it. Now I get to do that. Even a lot of my own experiences, the ridiculousness of it. Let's finish watching this.
His side, they can't. Ultimately, Mike defects to us. It's an amazing story. So look out for that film. Press the BBC to put it back on. Scientology and Me. Read my book, Scientology, The Church of Fear. Send money to, if you can, to Mike's lad to help him get through university.
I just got a comment on that stairs going up to the bookshelf. That is like a fantasy of mine, to have something like that, floor to ceiling bookshelf. I just really like that. How interesting is it? It always has been to me that John Sweeney was able to have a relationship with Mike Rinder after that, and sit downs and stuff that they did. To go from being on completely opposing sides of, Mike Rinder being in a position in the Office of Special Affairs to completely mess with these guys, to sitting down and talking and having this conversation and agreeing to go after Scientology together. Anna No says, Natalie, you know what Christy and their boys are going through will bring up feelings for you. Oh, yes. It does, and it has. Jersey Jan says, although my feelings about Mike Rinder flip-flopped, I met him in New York and he was very nice. Stopped for pictures with us and autographed copies of his book. That is very cool. I wish I would have gotten an autographed copy. I don't think my copy, no, because I got mine on Amazon. Anna Christie, so I'm in the hospital because I had an aneurysm, and the lady who does the food orders from the cafeteria also dating a guy that she refers to as my Tony. She's too cute. She gets all giddy. Well, Anna Christie, I hope you have some really good healing ahead of you. That's huge. Hope you're doing okay. And we send you lots of love and aloha as well. Mock says, forgiveness is about choosing your own peace. That is such a great way of putting it, and I completely would agree with that. Jen Hobbs says, prayers and thoughts to Christy and the boys, his children still in, his friends in the community affected by his passing. May he be at peace. Thank you, Jen. That's very kind. Nisa says, my heart goes out to his wife and kids. Even though his son missed his chance to be with his father, my heart goes out to him too. And it's the disconnection that caused it. Exactly. His kids who were in the Sea organization, who never had an opportunity to see and be with their father after that, even during his last days. That's Scientology for you. Amber Vanessa says, there is also no word for I'm sorry in Scientology. My mom doesn't think she did anything wrong. Everything that happens is what it is. You're right, Amber. That's very true. That's very true. Lori Plays says, FYI, Jack's college fund is through Florida Prepaid. That's what I used, and my daughter now has a BA and is debt-free. It's an excellent program. Yep, that's where the link goes to. Amber says, my wish for the Rinder family is that the older kids can meet their brother and be a family. I agree. It's not too late. It is not too late. Asen, I wonder if his kids in the cult could talk to him one last time. Yeah, I doubt that they did. Bad Thayton, how old is his son Jack? I'm not sure. I think he's in his early teens, maybe, but I'm actually not positive. Anderson's Danish was Mike Rinder's parents in Scientology. They absolutely were. His sister, I think, is still in the Sea Org. Be Merry for Life says, I loved watching Mike Rinders and Leah running around being chased by private investigators and trying to get them to pull out in front of them. They had a blast showing the PIs and their stupid tactics to all of us. Yeah, that's for sure. Nomfic says, cults remind me of car salesmen. They could sell you a car even though you didn't need one. That is so true. And that's Scientology's tactic. We're going to find out what's ruining your life. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and show you how Scientology is the only thing that can help you. Scientology is the only thing that can possibly save you. 39 says, when a former higher up like Mike Rinder passes away, is there like a celebration? Not the word I'm looking for, by the church. Not that I'm aware of, and I hope not. That, not that I'm aware of. I don't know what their reaction would be. I can kind of guess, but I kind of don't even want to speculate because it's disgusting. Not what you said. I'm just saying what you're calling out is actually probably a thing, and shame on them if that's the case. Asen says, not allowing to laugh, not allowing to cry or be sad, denying anything human is cruel. That's so true. That is so true. Super Weekend Warriors, great point. Scientology is so close to living in North Korea. Absolutely. Scarlett says, thank you for not using the outdated racist W word for non-Scientologists, Natalie. You are welcome. When I came into the community, I became educated. I had no idea. What we were told it meant in Scientology is not what it actually really means. But I know that even when I have my guests on that might not know, I try and let them know as well. Marilyn, good morning. Good to see you there. Hi, Becky. I see you there too. Martha Slemmer says, had the honor of meeting Mike during the Superfan benefit tour in Clearwater in 2021. Oh, that's very cool. Don Gloves, thank you for being here. And thank you for the reminder to be merry for life. Make sure y'all click that like. I always want to say double tap your screen, but that's only, I think, if we're vertical, does that work? Justine, I hear you about the bookshelf. I thought he might be in a library. Then it's too nice. So I'm sure it's in his house. Oh my God, have a big house big enough for a library where you need the stairs. Yeah, I don't even need the big house. I just need the wall of that. Marilyn Honig, Coffee, Cults, and Crafts. My heart goes out to Christy, Jack, and all of Mike's friends and family. I wish them peace and love. Thank you, Marilyn. That's very kind. Jamie Castro, exactly. That's terrible. So they never knew their dad. No, because even when, growing up in the Sea Org, they didn't, Mike Rinder's kids didn't grow up being with him all the time. They were in the Cadet Org. They then became Sea Org members. So, I mean, how do you establish and have a relationship? And then when you don't have one after Scientology, then it's just something that my hope is that one day his adult children do get out of and leave Scientology and are able to go and read and see all of the content that's out there that Mike Rinder created to expose Scientology and understand that it was for them too. It's interesting because in Scientology, we believe that our kids working in Scientology, us working for Scientology on staff or the Sea Org was the best thing that we could do to help people. And of course, that's not true. And my hope is that one day they'll come out and see his body of work in what he did in the book, read the dedication to them and understand that that was for them too. Like that is, It's hard. It's when you're in a situation of, you're going to lose your family if you speak out, but how do you not speak out? And this is a tough situation that many are in when it comes to leaving Scientology, who even want to speak out, but that's why we call them under the radar, because their heart is not in it. They want to maintain their good standing in Scientology because some of them have children in the Sea organization or that are on staff. And it's just the easier way to do it is not speak their truth or speak their mind to maintain that connection. Imagine what that's like. It's like, well, I don't have to imagine it. I can remember living it until I left. And even that, there is such freedom in being able to speak about this group, this cult, and growing up with it and what happens within it so openly, and talk to other people about it who are sharing their experience and answer questions from all of you on what that's like and how you relate to it. It's such a huge part of healing. Renee, thank you so much. I'm growing out my gray. I've been telling you guys, but thank you. I showered this morning. But I'll take it. Thank you. Oh, Cassie, great question. How long before you think his kids inside still will be told of his passing? Damn. You guys tell me. What do you think? If you're on the replay, jump in those comments. What do you think? How long do you think before Mike Rinder's grown children are told of his passing? And what will they be told? Tell me what you guys think. I can't even wrap my head around that. I don't know. Scientology, everything they do is in the best interest of Scientology. So you have to think of it from what would be the best interest of Scientology. What would be that move? My gut tells me it would be to pull them aside and tell them and make sure they're not waffling in their dedication to the Sea Org because of the loss of their father. My thought is Scientology and the Sea Org will want to control the narrative and not have them find out a different way. So again, so that they can control the impact this might have on the kids. But you know what? I really want to know what you guys think, actually. So jump in the comments, if you're on the replay, jump in the chat. I hope they do it right away. But how many stories have we heard where somebody loses a parent, a sibling, a family member, a friend, a spouse even, and they're no longer in Scientology and they're still in the Sea Org and they pass away or they get sick or something happens and their family outside of Scientology never hears about it. And that goes both ways. So I'm not sure. Aloha to you, Marilyn. I'm really not sure. Mock, that's interesting. Actually, there's probably more illusion of a normal life in North Korea if you listen to the defectors. That makes sense. Scarlett says, I wish all of Mike's well at this sad time, and I hope Ben and Taryn leave one day soon. Me too. Wouldn't that just be the greatest thing? That would be a wonderful, somewhat full circle moment for those adult kids to come out of Scientology and connect with their amazing stepmother and get to know their siblings and still have a family. It is not too late for them. It's not too late for them to have their own family, to still have children if they want. Not everybody wants kids, but if they do, to have the choice to be able to do it. But if nothing else, be there for their siblings, with their siblings be there for them. Keeping them apart like that is beyond cruel. Jess, good to see you. Very sad for Mike's older children. Absolutely, because you know why? They're not going to be able to express the grief. They're not with anyone, not in front of anyone. They can't, if they feel any loss, which tell me, so I mean, even if you lose a parent or somebody and you had beef, right? There's still a loss. If you've had dysfunction with your parents or even you weren't in touch and one of them passes, there is still a loss and they're not going to be able to express that loss. All they can do is express resentment, hate, disgust, and disdain towards their dad if they want to maintain and be in good standing in the Sea organization. My guess is they're rounding up those two and controlling the narrative with them and making sure it's not so much of a loss that they do something like actually leave. Escaping the cultiverse. Good to see you, eh? We've lost a legend. Mike took on Goliath and delivered effective blows to the beast. I thank him for his courage and his unwavering dedication to exposing the evils of the cult. Thank you for saying that. And hi, Juanita. I think I saw you go flying by there. Francis says Mike Rinder was an honorable man. He could have taken a payout like Marty. Says a lot about him. I would agree. And for those that don't know, it's Marty Rathbun. You can Google Marty Rathbun Scientology. Marty Rathbun was David Miscavige's right-hand enforcer, left Scientology, did a lot of content with Mike, and then one day started doing content about former Scientologists. And, you know, the belief, the rumor is that he took a payout from Scientology. And that's why he went from exposing Scientology to attacking former Scientologists who were exposing Scientology. That was Marty Rathbun. Candace says, my thoughts would be his adult kids going to care? Would be, are his adult kids going to care he passed? They might act one way, but I can imagine that they're not going to not care. Liz Gale, good to see you, hun. I remember being told horrible things about psychs or SPs passing away or suffering and being told they pulled it in. And that's what happens when you leave Scientology. Yes. Yeah. That's why it's so hard for so many, because you're like, what if they're right? What if they're right? And they're not right. For anybody under the radar, if you watch my channel, you know there's plenty of life after a cult. Plenty of it. Wow. Mary James says, we did not find out about my cousin's passing until 4 years later, and it was not from the cult of Scientology. Wow. Wow. Hey, Church of Satiretology. Church of Satiretology says Mike's passing is a great loss, but his legacy unites us in the fight against Scientology abuses. Let's honor him by healing divides, continuing his brave work, sending love to his family. I 100% agree with that. And if nothing else, that for me is kind of the whole point of this video. I'm going to keep showing up every day and exposing Scientology and doing that. And I hope that you guys join me with that. And I hope that if you're interested in exposing Scientology and shedding light on this cult, and that you've done so in the past, that you continue to do it. I think a great way, however, regardless of your feelings of Mike Rinder, he did do a lot to expose Scientology. Many people have been impacted in ways that, I mean, it would take hours to be able to explain, who left Scientology. A lot of former Scientologists, especially public Scientologists, who only knew Mike Rinder from the stage, and to see a person like that leave Scientology. That's why they don't want people to talk to former members. It's why they don't want former members to know people like Mike Rinder leave Scientology. They just can't have that known. They can't, because of the impact that it would have on people. So that, you know, and if you're not familiar with him in some of the earlier content, there's great information there, especially on his blog, that you can use if you want to continue to expose Scientology, things that you can learn about to be able to do that. You can definitely go and check that out. Brenda says it's hard to escape how you were raised for anyone, but especially if raised in a cult. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Gary, something like that. They probably said your dad died, get over it and get back to work. That would be the overall, based on any time that I've dealt with that kind of thing before in the Sea Org especially. Yeah. Yeah. They'll do a loss of a person assist, which is one of their assists, which is basically to get you to forget about them. Look around and find something that doesn't remind you of whoever the person is that you lost. It's forget. You don't want to be reminded of it. Well, you know what, Scientology, we actually do. We do. Not being reminded of a loss doesn't mean it didn't happen. All right. So, Liz, I just love the comment you made there. That is so true. That's all I got for you guys. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and do your best to keep showing up with Aloha. I am. Let's expose Scientology. Let's get those stories out there. If that's what you're here for, welcome to my channel, because that's what I do here each and every day, and try to connect with all of you. And if that's what you're not here for, welcome anyways. Aloha to you. And thank you for being here. It's going to be very difficult for a long time for his family. So thank you for continuing to show support for them and kind words for them, because they're the ones who are dealing with this loss. His family and the people who are close to him, his friends, those that helped out. We heard about how they were helping Christy and the boys, and having that support is amazing. Is absolutely amazing. So that's what I got. I hope you guys get out and have an amazing cult-free day.